Yo, what's going on? I'm Marcus. You're at the channel The Debt Free Dad, where we're talking finances, we're following my debt free journey, we're talking about tics. We kind of got a little gumbo of everything going on this channel. Today's video is going to be dope because I have a special guest. Now, before I even dive in, let me talk a little bit about how I found this channel in the first place. The channel name is Asian American Legal Focus. It's with Judy, the YouTube lawyer. And I actually did a video where I was talking about law school and how much it sucked, but the pros and the cons. And while I was doing research, I saw her channel come up, and it was actually a dope channel. It's a dope channel. If you're interested in the law, if you're thinking about becoming an attorney, if you want to know what goes on in the daily routine of attorney, if you're interested in cases that are going on, where she goes through the transcripts, interviews, cross-examinations, live stream of jury verdicts being read for certain criminal cases, she has a broad range of topics that we discuss, all related to the law field. So it's definitely a dope channel. Hey, I'm appreciative to have her on the show. And in today's video, we're going to talk about money mistakes that attorneys have seen that are common. Some of them you'll probably know, some of them you won't. Hey, if you miss a few, y'all go ahead and chime in the comments. But let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to I tell y'all, this feature actually has this music feature, which is pretty dope. But I'm just really learning how to use it. So I'm not the best at timing my intros and outros. So it's not as smooth and cool as I thought it would be. But we're going to go ahead and tag in our special guest today, our special host on the show. And we're going to get started. What's going on? How are you doing today, counselor?
Hi, I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me, Marcus.
Hey, I appreciate you being on the show. You're one of really the first legal channels that I came across on YouTube. And, it's funny because now anytime something happens in the legal world, I don't care if it's a Second Amendment or abortion, I'm like, I wonder what's her take on these particular topics. but some of that stuff isn't that necessarily finance related. So I may do something on TikTok where I talk a little bit more about it, but it's dope to just have somebody and get your perspective. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell a little bit about your channel before we dive into the money mistakes that we've just kind of seen during our tenure.
Sure. My name is Judy Singh. I grew up around Atlanta, Georgia. Went to UC Berkeley for undergrad, Georgetown for law school, worked around DC briefly before I had to move to North Carolina. And after working for a few small law firms, I started my own solo practice 16 years ago. So I do all sorts of general civil litigation as well as family law and employment law cases. And also, I definitely remember finding your channel because of that video you made, which has thousands and thousands of views about whether going to law school was worth it. And I thought it was funny when you held up your bar license or something in a frame. You were like, I don't even know these people. But isn't that great that you got so many views? I mean, do you have more than 10,000 views on that?
Yeah, on that video, honestly, that's one of my best performing videos. I did that video. Then I did another video on what to expect your 1L year. And those two videos are probably some of my longest standing performing videos. I had to go through and kind of rebrand it though, so to speak. I actually put the year in there and I took that out because, that's that evergreen content. Every year is a new batch of people who parents like mine was telling me that they're going to be an attorney since they were 2. And so now they want to know, is this really something that I could consider? So it definitely performs well. And hey, I appreciate you checking it out and actually sharing it too as well. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So it's nice to meet you through YouTube and then also find out that you used to live right around here and practice, and we know some of the same people too. So
definitely a small world. Yeah, definitely a small world. And I probably would have never got out to meet you because in those days I was in court 24/7, and after dragging around the courthouse for 8.5 hours, I was like, the hell with this, I'm going home.
Yeah, by the time you graduated and you were working in Durham, I had already moved from that firm in Durham to work in Wake County. So my office was most likely up on Six Forks in Raleigh. So I hardly ever did cases out in Durham. I mean, I did have a couple, but they were all civil cases. So I don't think we ever would have run into each other at the courthouse, even if I went to Durham. Yeah.
Right. So it's funny. So I think the best way to start this is actually with our comment that we have on the screen. And I saw that comment. I was like, damn, that's a great way to start it. A lot of lawyers try to keep up with the Joneses, buying expensive cars, houses, public's idea of what success is, trying to impress others. So let's go and start right there. I think that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, there are certain professions where I think that the image that you have as it relates to your lifestyle and how affluent it is, let's keep it. In some cases, an attorney and a rapper have a lot in common because you have to look successful. Ain't nobody trying to listen to a rapper if he dusty and got one gold chain on. I want my rappers to have 6 gold chains, a huge watch, diamonds all over it. The same way I want my attorneys to look like a winner. So do you think, just let's talk about that first, just from a profession standpoint. Do you think that's something that's you think is pervasive? Because I'm gonna be honest, I don't really give a damn about what type of car my doctor drive. But if I'm going to a law firm and I saw a beat up Toyota outside, I would be honest, I would be like, how successful is this guy? What are your thoughts on just that appearance of having with when it comes to attorneys?
Yeah, so that makes me feel like I should park my car farther away from my office building so clients don't see my Toyota Corolla with that front part of the fender kind of coming because I'm a cheap budget-minded person. But it's so true. I could give so many examples, like an attorney who's all into buying Chanel and designer expensive suits and stuff. This person confided in me later that she was working at a grocery store as a cashier to make extra money on the side because she wasn't making enough in her law practice. And there's another attorney I know who would always post on Facebook all these expensive vacations to exotic places and stuff. And then I found out that this person is more than $60,000 or $80,000 in credit card debt. So
wow.
It's just weird. It's like, like once you just don't believe what you see on social media and don't compare yourself to other people because chances are likely they're just faking it or you don't know the full story of what's really going on with them and their finances or their spouses or whatever.
Hey, that's 100% true. And but before we jump into our list, I'll tell you, at one point when the debt-free dad was the debt dad, you could take the word free out of it, right? Early days as a public defender, I'm making like, I don't know, $38,000. Probably underemployed if you want to, define it that way, probably a little underemployed. And so I had credit card debt and I had this bright idea. I was like, man, my wife's credit score went through the roof because she just waited 7 years, didn't pay some stuff and things fell off. I said, I'm going to try that. And they sued my ass. I ended up having to work things out. Think about it. I'm in court practicing, and I actually got a case that's about to go to court. I was like, nah, we got to negotiate this. This is freaking embarrassing. But a deputy explained it to me the most. He said, man, you would be amazed at how many service of process I serve on some of the attorneys who people think are the most successful and the most affluent and have the most. And it's all related to debt, credit card debt, not paying mortgages, all sorts of crazy stuff. So that's definitely a common thing, especially with the rap and legal profession.
Yeah, and actually there's an attorney, you might even know him because he practiced around Durham, but I heard that when someone was working in his office, they all had to be really quiet when the landlord was coming around because the guy hadn't paid his office rent yet. So, the guy was always in financial difficulties and stuff. And it is really sad because, people work really hard, but yet, especially if they're the only successful person in their family, then they feel obligated to keep giving money to their family members or giving out loans and buying stuff and donating stuff. And,
right.
it's like, kind of frustrating because people think that lawyers are filthy rich and stuff, but that's not really the case for a lot of people that I know.
Definitely. A lot of people do impute income just because of the title, not understanding that, $200,000 a year jobs is just not the norm. And so it's funny. We'll start out with things that everybody knows. Financial mistake number one that I'm talking about is not having a budgeting. And I'm actually going to say a little bit less than having a budgeting. I think just not knowing what's going in and what's going out of your household. I think I don't even define that as budgeting. I just don't think a lot of people even know the numbers or what they have. So I tell you, in my experience, a lot of times that's the mistake. A lot of people just swipe through. I've been in that situation. I've been a person in the past who just was like, I think I got it. Especially, I don't know if you know, in North Carolina, if you're a state employee, you get paid once a month. Getting paid once a month, if you have no budget, the first 2 weeks you'll be eating steak, and the last 2 weeks you'll be eating top ramen. It can get really crazy. So I'm a tag in number one is just knowing what's coming in, knowing what's going out, and having some type of basic budget.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally agree because there are plenty of really smart people, even Ivy League educated people that I know that don't even know how much their monthly expenses are. They just charge it all up and rationalize their expenses and say, I need this, my kids need this. Oh, I'm too busy and tired, so I got to get carry out every day. Yeah, got to
Yeah.
get DoorDash for my kids, you know.
Oh yeah, DoorDash. I always try to get DoorDash, but once I hit total and I see the fees is the same as the food, I'd be like, nah,
Yeah.
never mind, I'm good.
Yeah, it's like, "No, it's okay," I can just, like, bring out a can of chunky soup that cost me $2.
Exactly. You got to work smarter, that harder. Let me ask, and I guess this is an interesting question as someone who's in private practice. Now, I did private practice for a very short term. I graduated, and you know how you got those attorneys who like you do a little contract work and you start to build something up. And so, is there what is the percentage that you've ever seen a client come in and they knew they had a legal situation? So you can tell that they put some thought into, I'm going to have an attorney. I'm going to have to pay some attorney fees. Let me maybe set something aside for it. I felt like the time frame that I was doing it, anytime an attorney's called, unfortunately, most times it's not for joyous news. It's probably some type of hardship or some type of pain there. And I've never had someone come in my office when I was doing it saying like, okay, I knew this was coming down the pipe, or I had this contract dispute, so I put a little bit aside. I mean, people were trying to pay me in watches and goods that probably were stolen. So do clients actually come in and you can tell that they kind of had some foresight that I'm gonna have to retain this high-speed counsel to represent me?
Oh, nobody has foresight. I mean, yeah, basically, everybody comes in wanting to pay with a credit card.
Wow.
And
Okay.
yeah, and I'm not set up. I mean, it's very difficult, or to me, it's kind of like a pain in order to get a retainer deposit using a credit card.
Mm-hmm.
Normally you have to pay extra as a business owner in
Fees.
order for law pay or whatever. Otherwise, normally I would tell clients that they have to give me a real check, an
Right. Right.
old-fashioned check. You got to actually have that money in your account so I can put it into my trust account as a retainer deposit, and I don't do payment plans. So, but it's different, I guess, with doing criminal defense versus family law or civil litigation, because I've never had anyone try to pay me with watches or actual physical items. Oh, although there was this lady that said she could do some babysitting for me. I'm like, "What? How much babysitting do you think equates to me representing you in this hotly contested knockdown, drag out divorce slash custody slash support, child support case?" I'm not
Right.
gonna
Right.
babysitting for that.
Yeah, I think my kids would be best be in the care of someone else other than you, ma'am. That's hilarious. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
funny. I think the absolute worst. It was a criminal defendant who was charged with uttering a forged instrument, and then he came in and tried to pay me with a check. I was like, man, if you don't get the hell out of here and go get me a postal money order, I'm not taking this check, man. I look like this, but I'm not stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. You're like, "I'd rather take that watch."
Yeah,
That fake Rolex watch that you got at a swap meet for fun.
facts. Right, right, right. So let's talk about number two. I think number two is a common one that we see all the time. And let's go ahead and just put this. I would lump these two together, but buying too much house and too much cars. And it's funny because I actually am going to do a YouTube short video, maybe 20 seconds, but showing the cost of, if from the time you graduate from 25 to, let's say you graduate at 24, from 24 to 35, you have a car note, and the average car note is $500, the average insurance about 80, $90 a month. Just break down the math on what those numbers would break down to if you invested it at retirement. But I think the next big one that we got to talk about is, just too much cars and too much house.
Mhm. Yeah, I was going back to look at my old live stream since I had told you about my old live stream from over a year ago. Actually, you were on the
I saw
live
it.
stream. You were
Yeah. I was like, oh,
commenting.
I remember this.
Yeah. So I did mention, I was like, yeah, I don't know why people need to have a car payment of $500 to $700 a month. Well, lo and behold, I've been involved in cases since then where people were spending over $1,000 a month in car payments.
What the
Or
hell?
1,500 a
What kind
month.
of car were they driving? A Diablo? What kind of car you
Well,
driving?
I don't want to give more details because I could get in
Okay,
trouble.
it better be a nice car.
It is, yeah, but I'm like, you can't afford that. How stupid I mean, you don't need a car that costs you 1,000 or 1,500 a month. That's
Right.
ridiculous.
I think it's two traps, and one I really didn't get caught in, but I damn sure thought about it, and the other one I did. I think the first trap when it comes to cars, especially if you take that traditional route of, hey, go to college, go to undergrad, graduate. Once people graduate and you kind of get that first job where you're making, let's say $35,000, $40,000, where you came from making nothing, or $10,000 a year because you're just working summer jobs. I think a lot of people just kind of want to buy that thing to make them feel like I've accomplished something. So, when you come back from college a few states away and you got that nice BMW and you pulling up, and everybody like, hey, look at college boy over there with that BMW. He doing something. Little do they know that, you making slightly above, $15, $17 an hour, something to that effect. So I think that's trap number one. And I think trap number two, as it relates to, and it applies to cars and houses, more so houses. I made expenses related to cars and houses. And I'm gonna be honest, I blamed it on my kids. I remember when my son was born, my first child was born, my son was born. The first thing I thought was, I gotta have a house. I didn't need a house. I could have stayed in the apartment. He was this big. I could have stayed in the apartment for a year or two, but no. I was like, I need to have a house. And what did I do? I went out and got a house, and I had one of those bad mortgages. And if you don't know, a bad mortgage is a mortgage where the only thing you can do is pay the damn thing. That's all you can do. So thank my son for that one. And then when my daughter was born, what did I do? I was like, I got 2 kids. I can't have this 4-door car. I need this big burly SUV.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Think about the traps that lead to cars and houses.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've seen plenty of friends and relatives and clients where, they're just struggling and under so much stress every month because of their humongous mortgage and car payments. And they didn't really have to buy such a expensive house because, as I mentioned in my live stream, people often forget that other things can rise in costs, like HOA dues or property taxes are going to rise. And then after, say, like 10 years, all the stuff starts breaking down and you need a new water heater, or your flooring looks all bad, or, you need a new whatever HVAC system. There's leaks and stuff. So there's always going to be like home repair costs too. Not to mention, in terms of cars, as the costs of new tires or something breaks down. And it can just become like a money pit for either one of those things. Or even if it's not a money pit, it's still a major stress if you can barely afford those payments.
I agree. Is some things, especially like with a home, that's one of those things where you really need to be ready to buy it. Because, everybody like, oh, if I buy a house, my mortgage payment will always be the same. It may go up slightly because of taxes or insurance. But you don't really, well, for me, I didn't really see the benefit in that consistent mortgage. It probably took 3 years or so before that materialized as an actual value to me with that mortgage being consistent. Those first 24 months is repairs that pop up, is things that you didn't know were wrong, is you got to get this. Is the previous owner didn't tell you his kid put cement down the toilet and flushed it? It's so many crazy. These are the true stories. I talk through experience, sister. I definitely agree that, especially with a house, but those are things that you kind of have to plan and balance. and also some realization that sometimes more is less. Your kid don't need 3,200 square feet to play around at the age of 2. You know what I mean? It's just one of those
Yeah.
things. Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
good.
That's so true. Yeah, so you always gotta think about, what's the cost of maintenance and upkeep, and I didn't mention boats, like everybody says boats are total, money pits also. So, not that I know from personal experience, but that's what I've heard. Yeah, like most people
Well,
wanna get rid of their boat after a while.
I'll keep you posted because my father just got a boat. So
Okay, well, maybe if he's using it all the time and he derives a lot of pleasure and he can afford whatever the fees are for storage or
I
uh,
tell you, some people he's one of those guys in that regards. He's always been good with his hands. So literally, the boat he traded a piece of farm equipment he had with somebody else for the boat, and he fixed it. 72 years old, he fixed everything himself.
wow.
So he could get it. I did tell him, hey, before I get on that boat with you, I need you to sail it for get some nautical miles under your belt because I love you, but I can't swim that well, and I don't need to drown based on your half-ass boat repair.
Yeah, be sure everyone wears a life vest.
Right. Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. And so I think that the next thing on the list, which is a big mistake, and this could be number one. It probably behind budgeting. Actually, if I had to order them, I'd probably put it behind budgeting. Is not having a couple dollars stashed away for a rainy day.
Mhm.
Like the statistics is crazy that like 60% of Americans don't have $400 for an emergency that'll come up. It'll devastate them. So I think that's definitely high on the list. Again, this is something I learned from experience. I had a job. I thought this job was so secure, and I was like, it's always going to be a paycheck coming a couple weeks down the road. But I can remember so vividly when something happened, whether it was a car repair with the house, it was a stressful situation. Like I can remember mentally being stressed because I didn't have those funds there to be able to deal with it.
Mhm. Yeah, it can be totally stressful if you don't have enough. So, just as an example, one of my relatives, um, I mentioned that in my live stream also, ended up getting this really expensive special type of dog, and then the dog
Mm.
got injured and needed $7,000 of surgery. And of course, you're not gonna tell your kids, "Oh, we just gotta let the dog die and put it to sleep." So so guess what this person did? Asked me for a loan and then also set up a GoFundMe, to help pay for the dog's surgery and therapy. What do you call it? Like
Right.
physical therapy for the dog after the $7,000 surgery, and it was just a mess. So yeah, it still kind of annoys me to think about it, but, I almost didn't even get paid back. So that was
Wow.
another lesson I learned. Yeah, it's like, "Okay, well, I didn't make you sign a contract, but yet, you still don't think it's that much of a urgency to repay me by the time that you promised me you'd repay me." So, yeah. So that I learned my lesson really quickly. It's like, I should have known better. What I'm telling people about financial mistakes, and I just made my own mistake.
It's funny because you just hit two topics. Like so let me talk since we talking about pets. Yeah, well, we got a dog, about 3 years ago, and it was probably because of a stupid promise. I said, "Oh, when we get a house with a yard, y'all can get a dog." Then we got a house with a yard, and y'all don't remember to do y'all damn chores, but y'all remember me saying we could get a dog when we get a yard. But that's a whole nother story. But
Mhm.
I set the expectation early with my kids. I was like, "Look, we love little Gabriel. He's a part of the family. But if little Gabriel need like cataract surgery or something, we're gonna have to get rid of little Gabriel. I'm not paying $5,000 so a dog can have a special coat to make him comforted when he's in the thunder." So I'll be
Wow.
honest, I set that expectation with my kids really early. Like, hey, we're gonna keep this dog, but if some medical emergency come up, because I've seen people with dogs that had cancer and they're paying
Yeah.
for treatment, and then at some point the quality of life of the animal is important. So I definitely think pets, illnesses to pets, or my brother. I don't know if I ever told this story, but my brother, he liked all kinds of animals, and he would get like really exotic animals. So I can remember, him walking up to my school. The school was in walking distance to meet me. He had like an iguana just sitting on his shoulder. And I thought it was so cool because this iguana, it was like the same color as the jersey, and he spent like $2,000 or $3,000 for this iguana.
What?
Repeatedly, and the iguana never moved. But one day he walked up to the school and he walked past the tree and $3,000 gone. That iguana jumped off his shoulder, darted up the tree, and he lost $3,000 in an instant. So
Oh,
expensive
wow.
pets could get a little bit crazy. Pet health care. He had a $5,000 parakeet at one point. The bird,
Oh,
it was the most beautiful bird I ever seen in my life. After about 3 months, I went and looked at that bird. That bird was looking at me in the cage like, "Rah, help me." Like that bird didn't want to be there anymore.
oh.
So pets is definitely one, but I think this is a big one. Let's talk about loaning money. So you
Mhm.
talk about, you know, your family member had this pet situation, you loan money. I think we've all been down that road where we got burned before. If you haven't been down that road, you probably will. Um, do you have a general rule on when people ask to borrow money? I do, but I want to hear your take on it because that could be something that could, again, you can, excuse me, give something away and never see it again. So how do you handle those situations in light of that experience?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I'm kind of lucky because most of the people that I'm friends with and my relatives, most of them are well off. So I
Right.
don't have like a bunch of relatives in general or friends that hit me up for loans. And plus I'm really cheap and I look cheap. So I should have brought you my purse. The thing that I'm using as a purse is this beige canvas bag that I got for 50 cents on 50-day off,
Right.
50% day off at a consignment sale. Yeah, and it said something like the earth needs a good lawyer. And when I saw that canvas tote bag on sale at the consignment sale for 50 cents, I was like, oh, I got to get this because it has something to do with lawyers.
Right,
Nobody else
right, right.
has a raggedy tote bag, so I must buy this tote bag. So
Right,
I
right.
use that even though I have a very expensive Burberry bag, but I never used a Burberry bag because I'm always afraid that I'm going to ding it up or get it dirty and I can't just put it down like on a floor somewhere, someplace public. And so, like I just come across as a cheap, poor person, and that's fine. I don't want people wanting to ask me for money. So,
Yeah,
so that's the way to do it is like just don't look like a rich person, don't talk much about your money. And definitely in general, I wouldn't even bother loaning money to people these days because I got to think about my own retirement. My accounts
right,
have
right,
all been dropping like crazy this past
right,
year, and I'm not
right,
feeling too flush with cash anymore.
right,
Not that I
right,
am
right. Hey,
really.
hey, I definitely understand. You know, I guess when you talk about looking wealthy is all kind of context, and I say that to say that I have a couple of friends who, if I had to say from a socioeconomic standpoint, we probably all on the same page. So with those friends, I can have a conversation about, oh man, I was looking at this investment property because they're on equal footing. But I also have another group of friends where I wouldn't even have those conversations because it could be misinterpreted as bragging, boasting, those type of things. So I think one, you got to know your audience. Two is even if you're living a modest life, someone who may not have as much as you may look at you as an affluent person. You know what I mean? That's just kind of
Mhm.
what it is. I'll tell you, for me, as it relates to loaning people money, this is kind of my school of thought. If somebody say, "Hey, I need to borrow $1,000," I'm either going to just give you what I have to give you or tell you I don't have it. Hey man, I don't have $1,000 to give you. I can give you $400. Is that cool? And I just made it up in my mind, and I'm gonna part way with this $400. Now I will tell you, there's certain individuals who I put it in a unique category, and in that category, my general rule is, hey, if you ask me for something, I'll give it to you, whatever you ask me for. But the condition is you can't come back and ask me for anything ever again. And that a lot of times when I put it that way, people be like, "Is this the one opportunity I want to use?"
Mhm.
So it just kind of depends. But I generally agree, especially with friends and family, especially loaning money could be something to make Thanksgiving really awkward. So I personally try not to go down that road. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, you have the perfect so-called excuse is to say that I have 2 kids that need to go to college soon. So, you could always just tell a white lie and say, I don't have enough saved for college and I'm really worried about it. Or, I just lost a ton of money in the stock market, so I don't have it. I mean,
Yeah,
if you even need to give an explanation to a friend as to why you're not going to loan them money. And I totally agree with serial killer. Yeah, never loan more money than you can expect to get back. Yeah, because I've definitely seen those kinds of situations ruin
yeah.
relationships.
I
Mhm,
tell you too, I'm upfront about it. I'd be like, no, I'm not giving it to you.
mhm.
Yeah, I do have it. I had an individual who had a housing emergency, and they randomly showed up to my porch one day, and I see them through the Ring camera, and my doormat says on my doormat before you come in, it says, "If you did not call or text, we do not answer the door." That's what my doormat says.
That's
And
funny.
this is the same
Yeah,
one that
real welcome, Matt, huh?
and so this individual showed up. They had a housing situation, and I got advice for you. I may have a couple dollars for a room for the night, but the one place I don't have for you is a place to stay. I'm like, no, I don't care. Yeah, I do have a room that's my office, and it's going to stay my office too. The IRS is very peculiar about what your home office is, and you sleeping in it doesn't meet that requirement. So I tend to just go through. Hey, I either got it to give, I'm just going to give you a no, and don't ask why, because I'm saying because I just don't want to give it to you. That's kind
Yeah.
of
Well,
my
I
thought.
mean, but didn't you feel a little bad? Like, if your friend really had no place to stay, didn't you feel slightly obligated to at least let your friend stay a night or 2 or something? Or was it the kind of friend that you think would take advantage of you and never move out?
There was a little bit of that background in it too. So there's a little bit of background, like, nah, if this fool come over here and get one piece of mail, I'm gonna end up in court trying to get him out, is one. And I just can't see myself going through that route. I already know I'm gonna go through this route, which is probably more ignorant, but I'm gonna be like, no, you're getting the hell out. That was part of it. But the other part of it is it depending on the end. Is it if it's an individual, like, let's say you came to me, you always had a steady job, you fell on hard times, excuse me, and you were like, hey, I need a loan of $3,000 or $4,000. Because that situation for you is a one-off, I'm more liable to just say, you know what? I know you consistently have a track record of doing the right thing, so here. But in this situation, it was an individual who had a track record of consistently doing the wrong thing. So I was
Mhm.
like, no, I'm not about that. If it would have been a one-off situation, hey, come on in. You got a week, just let me know whatever it is you need. But because of the inconsistency or the consistency of their bad decision making, I was like, nah, I'm not going down that road. So I elected to give them a hard no. And it was rough to see them walk off through my Ring doorbell on my phone with their bags. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, that's right. It's always gotta be the individual circumstances and how well you know the person and why they're in that predicament or what their track record is. Yeah, because you're right. Like, haven't you heard all the things in the news about people whose roommates or the nanny that wouldn't leave, and then the family had to go through all the formal eviction process to get that horrible nanny to get out of their house because she wasn't paying any rent, or the Airbnb people that refused to move out of the house. And, there are just like so many laws that you have to follow once the person becomes like a tenant.
Now it's funny, and before we move on to the next one, it's funny because you talk about roommates, and I think the show is on Netflix, and I think it's called World's Worst Roommate or Worst Roommate Ever. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I've never heard of it. Yeah.
Now there's a series of maybe 7 to 8 episodes from these different situations. One, I could not stop laughing, and maybe you'll find the humor in this because you're an attorney too. It was a guy who was always sharp through high school and undergrad, but he was a little socially awkward. He go to law school, he doesn't quite make it and pass the bar. I think he graduated, but he doesn't pass the bar. But this guy knows landlord tenant law like the best landlord tenant property law attorney in the state of New York. So he went and he would move in his roommates and
Mhm.
never leave. And these people couldn't get him out because he knew the landlord tenant law so bad. I mean, I'm talking about he didn't pay rent for something crazy like 10 years because he would move in, pay rent a couple of times, establish these things. And so I watched, there was this one lady, she was like, I'm gonna get my friends, maybe we can annoy him until he go out. So she get like 10 of her friends to come over and they just up all night partying, trying to annoy this guy. This guy slammed his door. And it was funny because I said, you know what? This lady doesn't have any real friends. I said, you can find 10 of your friends to come over, party and drink and be noise, but you couldn't get 10 of your friends to jump them and throw them out. This lady hired the best of the best attorneys, and they couldn't mess with this guy because he knew just the landlord-tenant law and requirements so bad he can stay. The one lady who got him out, it was a lady, and he clearly took advantage. Smaller women who he could physically kind of maybe intimidate them. Mm-hmm. It was one sister who was from Jamaica, and he tried to intimidate her, and he looked at her, and she looked at him and said, "I don't know who you think you're intimidating, but I'm a third-degree black belt." So once she laid down the law, a tornado or hurricane, something happened in New York, and when they came back, he packed all this shit up and moved. And so part of it was he knew the law. The other part of it, he made sure to be roommates with people who he could know and intimidate. But it was the craziest story I ever seen of a roommate from hell, so to speak.
Yeah, because that story I was alluding to about the nanny that wouldn't leave the house after a while, I think that was also in New York. I've read about it probably a couple of years ago in the news. Yeah, and she was just mooching off the family and causing a lot of strife in the family and scaring them, but yet she still had a free place to live for quite a while.
Yeah, that's crazy, and I don't know if I could handle that in the proper means of a professional, good law, upstanding citizen, because that would drive me insane. So let's talk about, and this is kind of, I guess, your area of expertise. So you deal a lot with family law. We talked a little bit about it before we started the stream. It's funny, the marriage is the number one indicator of wealth in the United States, and divorce is the number one indicator of poverty, because those two things can change the trajectory of your finances for better or for worse, depending how it is. And so let's talk a little bit about, I guess, prenuptial agreements, okay? Mm-hmm. Not having a prenup, or I guess in some instances postnups. Do people actually use those a lot, postnuptial agreements?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I've done postnups, but it usually doesn't bode well for the marriage if the people want a postnup. So in those situations, most of the time, the couple ended up splitting up soon afterwards anyway.
So I guess what would be your prime situation is, because my view is, like, I guess I'm in a unique situation, and I guess I'm kind of blessed in that regard, was because, hey, fortunately for me and my wife, we both was broke as hell when we met and fell in love, so we had nothing to give anybody anyway. So I think it made that, like, what I'm gonna do? I don't have a prenup to protect nothing. I can't protect nothing.
Yeah, but the prenup, at least in North Carolina, it can also say that everybody forgoes alimony and post-separation. So that's why it's important. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why it's still good, even if you think that, well, neither one of us has anything, or we both make about the same, or whatever. I mean, it still could potentially be good for you in the future if you do divorce, because even if you say you have nothing, maybe by the time people split up, they do have some significant assets.
Right.
And one person's going to make a claim for alimony, and then all their stuff is intertwined. So they're fighting and squabbling and paying tens of thousands of dollars to attorneys to duke it out and fight over the property and the Chinaware and the 401ks and the retirement accounts. And yeah, it can still be a total pain with a lot of legal expenses. And even if you try to represent yourself, it's still no fun, filling out all those required forms, providing all the required financial disclosures, mediation, which you still have to pay for the mediator's time. So not to mention all the time lost from work and doing other fun things, dealing with your divorce case.
So let me ask you, we know that, if you, I guess the general rule is everybody has a separation agreement, a prenuptial agreement, kind of. If you don't have one, the state gives you their version of it, so to speak, is what typically you hear a lot of attorneys say. Have you ever seen an instant, because, not having that, especially if there's a huge discrepancy with one party having significantly more assets than the other at the time before they enter the marriage, have you ever seen, or is it common, or have you ever seen, I guess would be a better phrase, have you ever seen, okay, we have a prenup, and both parties just say, okay, we're accepting and going to abide by this prenup? I would think that it's something that's probably challenged 90% of the time. Is that true? What do you think?
Not really. I haven't been involved with, actually, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think there was only one case that I've ever seen where somebody was trying to challenge the validity of a prenup, but then I don't think that I don't think the other spouse ended up hiring me to do the litigation, so
Okay,
maybe the
okay,
case resolved or whatever. Yeah, because it is still kind of rare for me to run into couples where they do have a prenup. I would
right,
say
right.
maybe about, like, less than 10 or 5% of the people who come to me who are getting divorced had a prenup. And even then, a lot of times the prenup doesn't address, it's not allowed to
All the,
address child custody or child
right,
support
right.
anyway. And sometimes it just still said any marital property would still be split 50-50. So there's still more haggling and, financial stuff that needs to be worked out even with a prenup, depending on what details there were specifically in that person's prenup.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Mhm.
And it's just, I mean, when you talk about the separation of assets, because I mean, let's just think about it. When someone gets divorced, I tell people all the time, I'd be like, assets are divided, marital assets are divided, marital debt is divided. I mean, I've seen it. It could get so crazy. Not to mention throwing attorney fees on both sides and pettiness. I think the craziest story I ever heard was a guy who worked with me was telling me about his divorce, and this guy was real sharp, and him and his wife had a parakeet. And this parakeet was like a timeshare. Nobody wanted it. They kept trying to put it off on the other one. And the wife was like, no, you have it. The husband was like, I don't want it. You have it. The husband ended up getting stuck with the parakeet. And this was where the story gets awesome because the parakeet was trained to insult the husband. So it'd be like, oh, fat ass. And
Are you kidding? Is that
I
real?
that this person was a decorated special agent in a federal law enforcement agency. And he was like, parakeets have a life expectancy of X amount of years. He was like, I leave the window open, the damn thing won't fly away. It's living longer than expected. So
Yeah,
it can get
yeah.
kind of crazy when people like, just kind of, like out of spite, I want this or you have that, and it can get kind of crazy. How do you? I feel like do you wear that stress like when you're dealing with it because people are so
Yes.
heated?
Yes. Yes, exactly, and that's why I really would like to do more collaborative divorce and mediation because I'm certified to be a family law mediator.
Right, right,
But it's hard because, most people, including myself, for a lot of my litigation cases, we just use the same older, experienced mediators because everybody knows this person is a good mediator or a former judge, so it is hard to break into that. So instead, I still do my share of litigated cases where I feel like, depending on the client, sometimes it does feel like there's a cloud hanging over your head nonstop until that person's case is finally over. So
right,
it just depends. I mean, I try not to do any pure child custody cases anymore because I can't deal with that stress. I don't really
right,
need that
right.
kind of business. So I'll leave that up to the younger, hungrier attorneys that really need the business to handle those god
That's
awful
fair.
child custody cases.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. I think that's definitely big on the list. If we had to just define this term as just marriage, divorce, everything that revolves around it, that's one of the marriage is one of the most important decisions. It's probably the most important decision that an individual will ever make in their lifetime. You know what I mean? Just in making the wrong choice, having a child with the wrong person at the wrong time, it could be just so devastating, so taxing. Let's spin that off and talk a little bit about how expensive kids are. I have two kids,
Mhm.
and I think me and my wife have pretty good careers. And I don't know. I don't know how. I'm like, how the hell do y'all afford 5 and 6 kids? The two I get, like, this may sound crazy. And if anyone's like, I have friends and people I know who talk about child support, like, oh man, I'm paying this per month in child support. I be like, man, you know how much I pay in child support? My entire check. I don't know where it goes. I know I got a little bit that goes in savings and investment, and everything else is for literally
Mhm.
everything else. And so,
Mhm.
having children with the wrong person is one of those other things that could be a big, vicious financial trap that could come back and kick you in the butt for 18 to 21 years or even longer.
Yeah, I totally agree with you because, I used to do some of that child support attorney of the day
Mm.
contract work where I was in child support enforcement court all day dealing with these like sob stories of men who had just gotten out of prison or they were, doing car detailing or doing some construction work or, they're really, not suitably employed, but yet they have multiple kids with multiple women, and the kids might be raised by the grandmother or whatever, and it's just really sad because then a lot of times those guys would end up being put in jail because they weren't paying their child support and they had too much in arrearage and they were never going to get out of it unless some family member, usually their mom, would come and bail them out. For the day. Yeah, so it is so true. And I mentioned that on my live stream too about having kids or pets that you can't afford because kids are really expensive, especially if you don't have anybody around that's going to give you free childcare while the kid
Right.
is young. Yeah, childcare expenses are just ridiculous. They can cost as much as private college tuition to put a baby in daycare.
I remember at one point this was maybe 2011 or 2012, having two young children in daycare was more than the mortgage I was paying on my house.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I might as well just stay at home and watch the kids. Like really mathematically, it probably would have made sense to just stay at home and watch the kid, but for me trying to just get some experience as a practicing attorney. But yeah, definitely it's expensive. Child support rules are interesting and unique too, because I'll tell you an example. I knew a individual who was a truck driver, right? And this individual had children, went through a divorce and everything. And credit to him, he was one of those guys who just was like, I'm not paying the court anything. I'll do whatever I need to do for my child. I'll give, whatever my ex-wife need, I'll give her. And he had documented receipts of everything. And this guy was spending probably thousands of dollars a month and giving his ex-wife money to help with the bills and getting his kids stuff, and he had everything documented, money order and the whole nine. He just refused to go through the court. I'm not going to go through the system to tell me how to raise the kids. As a truck driver, because he refused to do that, they suspended his license and his ability to make an income. And,
Wow.
and he said when he went in front of the court with all of these receipts, the judge was like, "Hey, if it don't go through the courthouse, it's a gift. it's a gift." And that was kind of how they look at it. So they wanted them to provide, but they wanted them to provide through the vehicle that they want you to provide it to. So it's really unique that they had that ability to cut off his life. Now, of course, what did he do? Next month, he made that payment, got his license squared away, so he can continue making a living. But I can see child support is something that's needed, but there's a lot of abuse that could happen as well, depending on just vengefulness and stuff like that. So both sides of that argument and both sides of that coin is something that I've seen that could be true. Two things could be true.
Yeah, exactly. And so, Antoine the gentleman, thank you for being here. Yeah, that's why, in general, you probably don't want to prepay child support because then the quote baby mama could say that, oh, well, that was just a gift. That extra money was supposed to be for the kid's birthday gift or whatever. So sometimes it is better for people to have their wages garnished and go through to centralized collections. That's what they call it in North Carolina, so that I don't owe you any more child support. So stop asking me to pay for this and pay for that and all that stuff. So yeah, but that goes back to us saying that you got to be really careful who you have children with or who you choose to marry, because that can really sink you financially for life or
Right,
for a long time,
right.
because if you marry somebody that, is just like terrible with money and runs up credit card bills and is stupid with money and doesn't make good money, then you're going to be suffering those repercussions. Even if
Definitely.
you don't get divorced, you
Yeah.
could be married to somebody that just keeps wasting all the family's money.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if I had a way, I'd rather be divorced than stuck in a marriage where you just being irresponsible with the money.
Yeah, and so let me give some family lawyer advice out there. Here's some free advice that I'm not charging for. So I feel this is my opinion as an attorney who's done family law for more than 20 years, that if you are stuck in a marriage where the other person is already showing signs of being a deadbeat, like not working, squandering the money, running up credit cards, opening up joint credit card accounts in your name without your knowledge, doing all sorts of shady stuff like that, then you really should think about getting divorced sooner than later. Because if you encourage that kind of behavior or you don't do anything about it, you keep staying married to the deadbeat, then after a while, from the court's perspective, you are the supporting spouse, and this is the custom standard of living, and this is just the way it is that your, quote, deadbeat spouse has been the stay-at-home parent, and you're going to have to pay alimony. I mean, that's the risk if you keep staying with a deadbeat.
Hey, that was some free game right there. Y'all definitely make sure y'all kick that free game along. That's interesting. So let's move on a little bit from the family and the children. The moral of that entire segment was, hey, be careful who you end up with, plan it out, look at their credit, do all the things I didn't do. Go to pre-marriage counseling, look at their credit. I was like, what? You have how much of student loans? I was like, damn, we already vested now. Let's figure it out together, baby. Don't go down like the debt-free dad did. It could work out that way, but do all your due diligence beforehand, I think is the best thing to kind of end that up. Now let's talk about it's interesting because it was one that I think we talked about a little bit earlier where we talked about people in divorces wanting to get rid of pets and timeshares. And this was one that I saw on your thing, and I didn't even think of it. And I was like, yeah, timeshares are pretty terrible. Timeshares are probably the worst thing. And I signed one once, and I don't know if I ever told this story in detail, but it was just after, having a job where I was underemployed. I actually got a job making some type of decent wage. I go on a vacation because now I can have a little bit of, margin, a little bit of excess. I take my family on vacation. It probably was me and my wife. And we are so enamored and caught up in the beautifulness of this island and this tropicalness. When they sat us down and pitched that thing to us, I was like, yeah, honey, we can come here every year and I bought all of the smoke and mirrors. I signed everything. I power read through it. Keep in mind, I'm a practicing attorney, maybe 2-3 years in the game right now. I power read through everything. And they were really smart because they strategically didn't wait until the end of your vacation to plan this, right? They know how long you're staying at the resort. They know the amount of time you have to cancel it. So they want to have that meeting as early as possible so those days can start to lapse so you can limit your time that you had to cancel. The only thing that saved me and how I was able to get out of that, once I signed it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It consumed me. So I just started going on Google, going on YouTube, and I was like, oh my goodness, I got to get out of this thing. Once I got home, I read through this. It was probably 100 and something pages of document, and I found the smallest fine print that said, if you sign this agreement while you are on vacation, the amount of time you have to cancel this contract is extended by your stay because they realized that you're on that. And so, but for that, literally when I faxed that paperwork off, it was the last day that I had to fax it off, or I would have been in like a $30,000 a year hole stuck that would have been terrible. So I think timeshares are pretty terrible. Do you see anybody wanting the timeshare when they get a divorce ever?
Nobody wants the timeshare. Yeah. So really caution, do not ever get a timeshare. I've helped multiple people who got roped into timeshares or I've dealt with divorce cases where they already got a timeshare and nobody wants it. And actually, I was recently involved in a case where the people had to spend several $1,000s to pay a company to help them get rid of the timeshare. And hopefully that will work, but it's just terrible, especially since there's so much fine print and they can raise the rates on you, whatever they call the annual maintenance fee or
Right.
I don't know what they frame it as, but there's always strings attached. And after a while, people realize this is really no fun, or it's not available whenever I want to use my timeshare. I can't get the right property that I want. And, it's just like a total pain. Most people hate timeshares. They're not happy they got roped in.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just one of those things where they like, let's catch somebody while they're at a point of most being relaxed on vacation. probably got a couple of rum punches or mai tais or something up in them, they'd be willing to sign anything. It's funny too, because after they get another victim. So now once I got used to it and I know the scheme, I'm on vacation. I never go to those meetings because I don't want any of the free stuff associated with it.
Yeah.
But I'll walk past the room and I'll see them in there. And when they get someone to sign up, it's like confetti and the siren. And I'd be like, uh-oh, they just got another victim.
Oh, that's horrible. Yeah. I mean, I definitely would avoid any sort of resort that has that kind of timeshare tactic. Yeah, because that definitely happened when my family and I went to Cancun a long time ago. And then most recently, see, one of my relatives got roped into a Wyndham timeshare that's been in their family for many years. So they have to always stay at a Wyndham resort. Yeah. So we went there for a family reunion. And of course, the people at the resort, you had to go and meet with them right after you checked in. But of course, we're like, nah, no thanks. We're not interested. Bye.
Right.
So they left us alone. So that was good because I knew I definitely was not interested whatsoever in being roped into some Wyndham resort.
The power and ability to say no can save you a lot of money in a lot of different scenarios. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So don't be a pushover because, I often see people lending money to their significant other and then the relationship goes south and then the person won't pay them back. That's happened so many times, in cases that I've been involved in. And sometimes they can't get their money back later when their former significant other skips town and keeps coming up with a sob story or the statute of limitations is over.
Okay, now it's funny that you say that because it's funny. I was looking at the comments and I saw this comment right here. Women like to feel secure, right? And so which I agree with. I generally agree with the point in that comment right there. But it's funny because I have a friend who's same age group as me, and they're kind of out in the dating pool. And actually, how I didn't know that this was life because I'm married. How would I know what's going on in the dating world? But I saw a video on YouTube where a lady, maybe in her mid to late 30s, were talking about just kind of dating, and she went on, and I watched the whole thing. It was maybe 15, 20 minutes about guys who she date or whose friends she knows date who borrow money. And I was like, is this really a big consistent thing? And so I went through the comments. It's hundreds of comments. This thing got thousands of views. It's hundreds of comments. It's a common thing and I don't know. I'm sure men are borrowing money from women and women are borrowing money from men. But I didn't know that it was that many or that much borrowing going on in the course of like dating relationships. I can only think of one dating relationship I was in where I actually loaned, like, hey, babe, you want this? I loaned my wife, who I'm now married to, before we were married, I loaned her some money to buy like a used car. It was maybe like $2,000 or $3,000. But my viewpoint was, whatever. We in the military. I know where your room at. You ain't going nowhere for the next 3 years. I figure it out. I figure it out if you want to get janky and cut me off and try not to pay me back. But it's a really big thing where people are just loaning persons in relationships money and never getting repaid. There's court. There's no documents. I didn't think it was that pervasive, but it's a big deal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because a relative of mine is on some dating apps, and she said that there have been at least one or two shady sounding men that never wanted to meet and then started, wanting to know about finances. And, you hear about these scam artists. So that's another thing I would like to caution people about because I've heard about this from my line of work. You also have to be cognizant of elder abuse. Like if you have parents that are just kind of getting lonely or showing signs of dementia or something, there are scam artists out there who will try to connect with especially older women. They find them through social networks or Facebook or wherever, and then try to befriend them and then start asking them to wire them money and stuff. So I know of some elderly people that got taken in by those kinds of scams where the person just starts being like their so-called internet boyfriend, who suddenly needs $2,000 wired to them because their mother died or their mother had cancer or whatever. So yeah, that's another thing to be aware of, or at least warn your family members about it. If they're getting up in age, there are people who will prey on elderly people who are more susceptible to those kind of fraudulent schemes.
Right. And I think that's a good point. That was one of the, I guess, areas that I've prosecuted and investigated. It was financial abuse of elders, and a lot of times, I mean, I don't know. I never knew there was a Real Housewives of Utah, but I just saw an article where one of the ladies from the Real Housewives of Utah was caught up in mail and wire fraud, and they were defrauding senior citizens over the phone who weren't really
Oh,
computer savvy. And there's a lot of people who look to take advantage of persons who may be vulnerable adults in some capacity as well, or somebody who just out there, they looking for love in all the wrong places. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
definitely be cautious. And with the vulnerable adults, I want to say the people who I found, when I prosecuted those cases who took advantage financially of like elderly persons, were people who actually worked in the facilities where they stayed, because a lot of times they may not have families. So there's some agreement where this particular nursing home may be able to manage some of the funds, and you was find a lot of misappropriation. So that's definitely a way that funds could be lost, that we just kind of gotta keep an eye out. And it's disgusting. I make sure those type of people, I'm gonna prosecute the hell out you. I'm asking for the max, and I'm hoping the judge throw you under the jail, because not everybody has family who's going to look out for them and protect them once they're in a place like that.
Yeah, I had no idea you were involved in those kinds of cases, so that's good. I mean, you
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
felt good about doing that kind of work.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I felt, yeah, it was cool, because at some point, I would always say that could be me one day, as a 79-year-old guy in the facility and need people to genuinely help me and not take care of me. So that's definitely a thing. And so I think the last thing we're gonna close out with, and it's interesting because this is what started the channel of the Debt Free Dad, is student damn loans. Okay, we're gonna talk about student loans
Yeah.
because I,
Uh-huh.
I feel like this is the, well, maybe not now, and it could be because I'm kind of in this community of finance and stuff. But I felt like student loans were one of the debts that society sold, because they pushed this American dream of you have to have a college degree to be successful. So go ahead, tell us a little bit about your take on student loans. I know you got a lot of videos, and I see you talk about it a lot. So go ahead and give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the interesting thing is that I actually had no student loans because, my dad was a doctor and my parents were able to financially afford to put us kids through college and grad school. And so it wasn't until later, I started realizing that most people aren't that lucky, that most people had to take out tons of loans to go to college as well as to law school. But yet, I mean, I still felt kind of screwed over by going to law school because when I got out, it turned out that really the pay was nowhere near as great as I thought it would be. The job market was a lot harder than I had ever thought it would be to get a good high paying attorney position. So just because you have a higher degree doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be rich and that there's going to be lots of job openings available for you, that you're going to be set for life. So I mean, just one example is my brother-in-law, he's actually Mexican American, and so he came from sort of a lower middle class, working class family where his father did construction and had a little construction company in Texas. So nobody in his family went to college really, but
Mm-hmm.
he started going to college at a UT school, and then he never graduated from college because when he was a senior, one of his cousins got a job working for Border Patrol and told him about it. So he was like trying to apply as a senior in college to work for Border Patrol. So he ended up dropping out of college so he could work for Border Patrol. And thank God he never got killed or maimed or something doing Border Patrol work, which is very dangerous
Yeah,
and
right.
but, he makes more money than I do now, because he
Yeah,
worked his way up through the
right, right,
federal government.
right.
And he's worked his whole entire career since his early 20s for the federal government. And now he works for another federal agency, which I guess I shouldn't give too many details. Um, so he has a really nice pension. He can retire early. He could still do contract work even after he retires. Great, great benefits. He gets Fridays off, can work partly remotely. So that's just an example to say that, sometimes going to law school doesn't really seemed to be the better financial situation. If the other case would have been he could have gone into $250,000 of debt to go to law school or some other
Right.
graduate school that ended up, barely getting him a starting job paying 50,000.
Right. And I agree with that. I'll tell you, I had a good friend of mine who, he literally, we both went to the military at about the same time. I started, finishing up undergraduate and going to law school, and he became employed. And it probably took, I mean, as far as economic trajectory, he was ahead of me by probably 5 or 6 years, just off the simple fact that he wasn't over leveraged by any type of student loan. So, I guess one of the things I believe, it is funny, I put a video up of my son. It's his third week on the job. And, he's 15. And I was like, Doug, like, he's a STEM, science, technology kid. I was like, dude, your job is to go into a lab and use this. Like, when I was 15 years old, I was working at Arby's, messing up people's milkshakes, getting the order wrong. I once put sugar on the fries because I thought it was salt. And why the hell do they have sugar at Arby's near the fries? That don't even make any sense.
Yeah.
But the point is, there's different methods of education. Sometimes you can get your education through the school of hard knocks, through trial and error, through formal education. And so I think that student loans is probably I would probably say outside of the whole marriage, divorce, selection, family, children thing, student loans is probably the second biggest decision that you can make that could potentially impact your financial trajectory. So, do your open source research, go on the internet, Google. Everything is really available to you now, because I'm just content with the position that I just don't believe that the government is going to do anything to substantially change the life of you financially. If it's up to me to wait on the government to do something that's going to change my financial trajectory, I'm probably going to be disappointed. I mean, I don't know. Some politicians can't even ride a bike. So you think I'm relying on you to make a valid decision on something as simple as student loans? So at some point in time, you control your own financial destiny. You control your ability to get student loans. Don't let your parents push you to go to some place you can't afford, because that's a decision that's really going to be on you. Now, unless your parents are those who co-sign for all of these Parent Plus loans and all of that stuff. But my kids already know what we got for you to go to college is what we got. If it costs more than that, hey, you need to go be all you can be. Uncle Sam can use you. You can do anything you can do to figure it out. But once the money we saved up is exhausted, you got to figure out the rest. That's kind of our position.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that most private colleges or law schools are really worth the tuition. I mean, unless it's like Harvard or something, I don't think it's worth it when even low-ranked private law schools are now charging over $60,000 a year for tuition, and their bar passage rates are low and their employment rates are low. And even if you're employed, does that really mean you're making a good enough wage to have made law school worth the gamble? So
Right.
so yeah, I mean, nobody really talks about it, but there is a significant portion of people who go to law school and their lives are totally messed up because they went to law school and took out a bunch of loans, and then they can't pass the bar, or else they can't get a decent job. I mean, they would have been better off going to community college to learn something about technology or do something
Right.
with computers.
Right. What is the if the largest amount of student loan that I know somebody personally who had, and they went to a private undergrad, public law school, is one individual with $350,000 of student loan. One
Oh,
individual, and I tell you, that person has a good job. They make over $100,000 a year, but the interest on that $350,000, I mean, you're talking about a payment of almost $2,000 a month. And, when interest is going, it really makes no dent in it. And so it's just one of those things where they're counting down and just praying that, man, I hope this public student loan forgiveness thing is still around in 4 more years when I qualify. So, my heart goes out to people like that. Or like you said, people who got student loans, graduated or may not be able to pass a bar, may not be able to find employment in their field, so they're doing something else. It's just a whole, and honestly, is the student loans is part of the problem, but I think the other part of the problem that facilitated is just the overall cost of education. Like I actually made this comment on the video I watched about student loans maybe a couple days ago. Like, if I were, the cost of college keep going up because the colleges know that students have a blank check that they can get to satisfy that tuition. If I was a college, I would raise my tuition up as well, because I know people are just going to be able to get a loan and I'm going to get my money up front. That obligation is on them, and it's just kind of terrible.
Yeah. So I wonder, Erin, I'm reading what she wrote in the chat box. The person that has about 300K in the student loans and did a dual JD PhD, does that person think it was worth it? And did that person get a good job that's paying really well so that your friend or whoever can pay off the debt?
Yeah, man, a JD and a PhD, that's
kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, that's
why would you do that?
That's a lot of letters behind your name, dude. Well, I tell you, I think this situation is a little bit different, but I had a buddy who was a medical doctor and he was in law school. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you even here? You're a medical doctor. But he said, like, the cost of malpractice insurance, I didn't think malpractice insurance, but he's like, the cost of it was just so high. He was like, I can do this. And as a physician, because I had that knowledge, I can carve out a special niche for itself. And in his case, it ended up working out well to where he's, doing really good financially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People definitely have to do their research about different degrees and schools and, what the job market is like before forking over so much in terms of student loan dollars. Yeah. And I'm a total big fan of, just go to public law school. If you can't get into your in-state law school and pay in-state tuition, then maybe that's a sign from God that you shouldn't be going to that crappy bottom fourth tier law school that's charging $60,000 to $70,000 a year.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's good advice. Like I said, if I could do it over, I would have went to community college 2 years, public school, public institution, of course. Then when I got to law school, instead of paying out-of-state tuition for that first year, I would have actually moved to that state for maybe a year so I could get in-state tuition. Because, it was probably a $20,000 difference between in-state and out-of-state tuition. So I think those are all good points. What is I'll pass you the ball, give you your final takeaway on just, avoiding things. I guess let me drop mine first, and I'll let the guests close it out. And then I close everything out. I guess my final takeaway is don't do things on impulse. I think everything that we talked about can be surmised by just saying, don't make impulsive decisions. Take the time to think about the options, think about the alternatives, think about the pros and cons. And then once you got all the information, make an informed decision. And like you said, I've seen it all the time. We got YouTube and Google at our disposal, so knowledge is right at your fingertips. That's what I'm gonna leave it with. You got anything for them, Judy?
Oh yeah. So we haven't talked about credit cards. That could be a whole nother live stream.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you don't really need more than 2 credit cards, and you should always be able to pay off the full balance every month, because otherwise the interest and the other fees, late fees, that's going to eat you up, and you'll never get out of it if you only paid a minimum for your credit cards. So if you're maxing out your credit cards, then you really need to just put them away and stop adding more to your debt, because it'll really ruin you for life if you can't curtail your spending and using credit cards.
That's a great point. And it's funny as you bring that up. We talk about this 9.1% inflation rate that we got going on here in the US, and inflation impacts people in different aspects. I'm gonna be honest, inflation sucks, but it's not beating me down because I don't have a lot of credit card debt. The only 2 places where I see inflation consistently, gas and groceries. Outside of gas and groceries, I don't have a lot of credit card debt. I'm not at the whim of an expiring lease where my landlord is going to increase it 15 or 20%. I'm kind of blessed in that regard. So I think the motto is, this is the new shirt. The new shirt is, I collect interest, I don't pay it. Okay, that's going to be the new shirt that I would get. Is I collect interest. I don't pay it. So if you can avoid paying interest in any regard, that's always a good thing. Hey, I want to appreciate first everybody. Hey,
Yeah.
round of applause for our special guest. Hey, great job. Hustle, save, invest, repeat.
I'm trying to help you sell your shirt. Is it available on your channel?
The official Debt Free Dad website will be launching about August 15th or so. So y'all see some merch and some free deliverables and all of that good stuff there. I think I'm even going to have a blog there where I'm going to talk a little bit about fatherhood, finance, and foolishness.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. If you have time to do all that in addition to your regular
it's gonna be one blog a month. Trust me, it ain't gonna be a daily or weekly thing. But yeah, so I definitely thank our guests for coming on. I appreciate you as always. I appreciate the support. I love your content. I'm gonna have all your information in the bio. Also, shout out to everybody who watching and tuning in. Y'all know as always, hey, I respect, love y'all, thank y'all. Y'all take care. Have a blessed one. Peace.
Thank you. Have a good evening.